Meet our main character, a regular guy who woke up one day inside a crazy video game called Pick Me Up. He's now known as Han Islat, a low-level hero. Han didn't sign up for this, but here he is, forced to fight for his life, all for his master's amusement. When Han ends up in the game's lobby, he's surrounded by 11 strangers who seem just as confused as he is. None of them remember how they got here or what they're supposed to do. Then, out of nowhere, a fairy appears. She's like the game's manager, and she warns them about the game master opening a space-time rift. They need to get ready to fight, she says. The fairy doesn't give them much information and tells them to stay in line if they don't want to get hurt. This makes a guy named Mormont really mad. He accuses the fairy of kidnapping them, and even draws his sword. The fairy tries to calm him down, but Mormont is determined to teach her a lesson. However, before he can swing his sword, his head is chopped clean off. Yeah, it just got really intense. An announcement claims that Mormont returned to the embrace of goodness, and that he died from stress. Now, I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure getting your head chopped off isn't stress-related. The other people taken into this strange world are understandably freaking out. The fairy uses this moment to remind them that she's in charge, and that trying to harm her will end badly for them. She says all they have to do is listen to her, fight, and win. Then, a space-time rift opens up, and some names are called to form a party. Han, who's waiting for his group's turn, asks for some weapons. The other parties mostly consist of regular folks like farmers, woodworkers, and shopkeepers. They don't stand a chance in a fight without some help. Han seems to be the only one who knows what's going on, at least enough to realize that Mormont was important to their team. They look more like a suicide squad than a real fighting unit. The fairy passes Han's request to their master, who agrees to equip the armory with some basic weapons. Everyone else wants to know how Han knows so much, but he keeps it a secret, just telling them to get ready for the battle ahead. With weapons in hand, the terrified group heads towards the door. Han and a woman named Jenna hang back for a chat, but they're interrupted by some updates. It turns out the first party got wiped out completely, and the fairy, is pretty angry. She demands the next group of fighters to step up. When they pass through the rift, the party finds themselves on the battlefield known as Floor 1. Level 3 goblins are storming towards them, which scares 3 of their members so much that they take off running almost immediately, leaving Han and Jenna to fend for themselves. Han and Jenna work as a team, fighting for their lives with weapons they've never used against monsters that seem far too advanced for them. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. What's an underrated manhwa? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now back to the recap. In a flashback, it's revealed that Han used to play Pick Me Up himself, and was actually something of a god at one time. He was the 5th best player in the world under the pseudonym Loki. The goal of Pick Me Up is to fight to the top of a 100-level tower, using a crew of heroes and clever strategies. Heroes are used to fight and range from 1 star to 7 stars, depending on their strengths and abilities. But no matter how hardcore a character, the rules remain the same. Once you're dead while playing a dungeon event. Han's party was totally wiped out by a level 999 monster that he assumed was some kind of glitch. The game should have ended, but suddenly everything went black for Han, and he was sucked into the pick-me-up, forced to play a tutorial as a character named Tanya Slot. Having never wielded a sword or encountered monsters, Han fought desperately, driven by adrenaline and pure terror, to murder the goblins until he ranked up to 1 star. Upon completion, he entered the arena of Pick Me Up, where he was joined by a summoned hero who was added to their party. Han quickly realized that he was being controlled and thrown into these scenes by a master with the username Whatever. This master threw Han and the summoned knight Shay straight into a dungeon together. As a 4-star hero, Shay had no problem slashing through each monster, while Han scrambled just to stay alive after his poor performance. Han was sent to be synthesized, a process whereby 2 heroes are combined to increase their stats. During synthesizing, one of the 2 heroes is guaranteed to be destroyed. Given the difference between Shay and Han's skill level and stars, he assumed the player above would have no reason to keep him, and that he was well and truly doomed. And yet, somehow, he was chosen over Shay and allowed to advance to the battlefield, where he and Jenna are now fighting for their lives against the goblin horde. They are doing it without any backup since their teammates are quickly snapped up and killed. Somehow the pair manage to hold their own even though Han loses an arm in the process. Since he knows the game, he's aware that it'll be healed when they return, but that doesn't make it any less painful in the moment. A few days pass after their first battle, and Han reaches a kind of acceptance with the harsh reality of the world of Pick Me Up. Instead of panicking, he starts training because he knows his life depends on becoming a hero worth keeping around. If he wants any chance at survival, Han has to adapt and fast. While slaying goblins is new to Han, adversity isn't. Without family to protect him, his younger years were full of struggle and hardship. That's turned him into a born fighter. Looking at her stats, Han realizes his partner Jenna has potential. She's a one-star hero like him but has room for growth and the right mindset to move forward in the game. So he decides to help her. Han's existence is jumbled up between the real world and the game. He can see other people's statistics levels and the messages the real-world player receives. He realizes this when he summons Yesel and discovers the heads-up display visible to him. He asks the fairy what happens if the master quits the game, to which she responds they just have to pray that won't happen. Super helpful as always, Yesel. Thanks. Han guesses that time flows differently in the game than on Earth, since his access shows the player hasn't logged on in an entire week. He also discovers that Yesel can't hurt other heroes unless they step out of line by attacking her or refusing to follow the player's orders. Han explains all of this to Jenna, telling her their only chance is to get to the top of the tower and hope to be released by the time the master returns to the game. Han has worked hard enough to earn 2 skills through his training, gearing up for Floor 2. The master summons 3 new heroes named Aaron, Toby and Yeltsins, all of whom are 1 star. When they arrive, they're just as confused as Jenna and Han were. But they barely have any time to explain things to the newbies before the space-time rift opens and they are sent off to battle again. Their new companions seem pretty useless from the moment they step foot on Floor 2. All of their stats decrease due to the fear of wolves and goblins awaiting them. Initially, Jenna is also affected by the stat deduction, but Han calms her down by joking around and manages to get her courage back up. It's a good thing too because their new enemies seem even more vicious and bloodthirsty than the last. Han makes quick work of the wolves, and Jenna's archery skills have improved enough that she manages to take out all the goblins. The 2 of them clear the stage all by themselves and even keep their useless team members alive. Once they return to the lobby, their master logs out, leaving Han to assume he has another 3 days to train before their next battle. Upon return, his stats also level up, proof that his previous training has been paying off. But as he watches his teammates devolve into panic, Han decides it's every person for themselves. He doesn't want him or Jenna to waste their time trying to bring everyone up to their level. The others will likely be synthesized soon anyway. The next day, the newbies are too busy looking for the exit to train, which leaves Jenna and Han to work ruthlessly to up their skills and weapons proficiencies. When the master next checks in, they make quick work of the 3rd floor. Though this time, it's Jenna who levels up and makes MVP for a change. Just like last time, the new members don't lift a finger, and his punishment for their disobedience. The master sends them back to the 1st floor to fight battle to battle all the way from the start. Han and Jenna are still the only ones doing any fighting, and so, just as Han predicted, the master starts up synthesis the moment they return. That means some of these fools are going to take a hard L, but at least it'll make Han and Jenna stronger. The first up are Jenna and Yeltsins, and as expected, Yeltsins is erased, and Jenna levels up. Next is Han and Toby, who goes a little crazy in his last few moments. Wouldn't it be funny if their master got rid of Han right now? That would be such a curveball. But that doesn't happen, and when Han merges alone, the last member, Aaron, seems to finally comprehend the danger he's in and how lucky he is to be spared. The next day, Aaron arrives at the training camp and apologizes for being useless, asking the 2 heroes to take him under their wing and teach him how to survive. Han throws air in a spear and challenges him to a fight straight away. The poor new guy doesn't have a clue what he's doing and gets completely battered by Han, who tells him he won't make any allowances for weakness. If Aaron slows him down, he will be left behind. Han's treatment, though harsh, seems to work, and it scares and angers Aaron enough to light a spark in his eye that signals his determination. Looks like he won't be making the same mistakes again. After their training, Han goes off to talk to the fairy, since he used to be Loki, one of Pick-Me-Up's best global players. He knows how to help their master advance and improve their prospects in battle. Realizing the fairy can send their master tips, he asks her to look up a popular post on the internet and suggest a combo to their master. He also asks how he knows so much about the game, and Han reveals that he used to be Loki, the master of masters. The fairy thinks he's bluffing, so Han reels off his account number, something only Loki would have had access to. When the fairy looks it up and realizes he's telling the truth, she practically begs him for his autograph because she wants to join his fan cafe. Seems like Han was a seriously big deal out in the real world. As a superfan, the fairy is suddenly worried about the consequences of the real-life Loki being stuck inside the game, like what will happen to his famous 13th floor waiting room in Nilheim. It's a popular spot with top-quality facilities and the capacity to host over 20,000 gamers, so obviously it would be missed by thousands of fans if Han didn't ever make it out of the game. Talking to the fairy, Han realizes that the world he's stuck in is unlike other games because the heroes here are actual living humans. He wants to ask the fairy if they can escape by finishing the tower, but she can't give a definite answer to any of his questions. This makes Han think about his own actions in the game and whether he unknowingly caused real people to die. As they continue their training, Han notices that Jenna is a quick learner and excels with every weapon she tries. On the other hand, Aaron struggles to keep up and lags behind. To help Aaron, Han asks the fairy to open the warehouse in their waiting room, and they gather materials for the forge. Han, being a half-master, can access various locations and facilities, which proves quite useful. After passing a challenging mini-game, Han crafts himself a shiny new longsword, and creates weapons for the entire party. This makes it easier to tackle the challenges on the 4th floor, although fighting with just 3 people is still tough since their master hasn't summoned any additional heroes. Upon logging back in, Aaron tries his best but remains far behind Jenna and Han. Jenna, not one to coddle, gives him a stern wake-up call, reminding everyone that in this place every action can mean life or death. Their tough love approach pays off as Aaron levels up and earns a spot in their master's favourites category for his improved performance. Han's leadership has uplifted those around him, despite his initial reluctance to help the weaker members. Jenna playfully refers to herself and Aaron as his underlings, which brings to Han's mind the submasters from his earlier gaming days. Back then, he saw them as mere AI, but now, trapped inside this game, he starts to think of them as people capable of thoughts and feelings. In a brief scene at Nilfheim, the base of the underlings, it becomes clear that they are worried about their master's absence, leaving your net in charge. Cyrus, one of the right-hand men, embarks on an investigation to find out where their master has gone. It's all very mysterious, but it kinda seems like these 2 underlings might have guessed what's happened to their master Loki. Back in Han's current waiting room, all the facilities are being leveled up, which means the capacity for heroes to grow has increased as well. It seems like the master splurged a bit and rewarded them for their dedication to training and skill on the battlefield. Han registers the master's locked hours and his occasional spending on extras like gems, and determines there's a good chance the real player is an office worker who is at least somewhat empathetic to his heroes. That's all good news for the party, since a pay-to-win player will provide them more support than a student or a teenager. But while the heroes are basking in their new and improved waiting room, the master is getting ready to summon 10 whole new heroes. Luckily, none of them appear to be premium multi-star heroes, which would threaten the existing party's chances for survival. But it's not all good news, since now they have 10 brand new and deeply confused randomers to bring up from the bottom. At least they might have done it if Han hadn't shoved a sword in one guy's face and told them all he's not helping anyone who can't prove themselves. Luckily, they don't all have to be combatants. They're useful divvies the newbies up according to their jobs to get them working at the facilities right away. I guess this ferry is good for something after all. Those without specialties are forced to push their bodies to prove their worth. As their master gets a hang of the game, he starts getting better at weeding out the weak heroes by sending them into the dungeons for testing. Those who don't adapt are as good as dead. And when the first party is nearly all wiped out, Aaron decides to join the next group to give them a better chance of survival. At least one of these heroes has a hard meanwhile. Han and Jenna hang back, seemingly unbothered about the new people being sent to slaughter. They start complaining about the food. Since the master is logged on, he gets a little notification about their discontentment, so maybe their grumbling will get some results. When Aaron returns, he is bloody and tired, but he's kept his whole team safe. Unfortunately, it's potatoes again for dinner. Some of the newbies pretended to be better than they are to earn a spot. When Han finds out the cook lied about his skills, he demotes him right there in front of everyone. He picks a different girl to do the cooking. Sometimes it feels like Han's the real leader, not just a player. He shows he's in charge by explaining to the newbies that they'll have to teach the next group. While he hasn't given much help before, at least now the new members have a chance to prove themselves. Even if you're not a fighter, you need to work hard because if someone better comes along, they'll take your spot. There's no rest in pick-me-up, not even for the chefs. The next day, they only have 3 new kids for training. The rest might still be trying to find a way out or hiding. The 3 kids try their best, but they don't improve very fast. Aaron works the hardest and trains the longest, but he doesn't seem to be as good in the ring. He does help by introducing the new members who arrive in the next few days. Only one person died during the weeding. As more people join, Han starts worrying about who will lead the first party for the 5th floor. Every 5th floor is like a boss level, and it's so intense that even Han is scared he might not make it. And that's just the 5th floor. The danger will only get worse as they climb higher. Things are just beginning for Han and the heroes of Pick Me Up. On the 4th floor they use their new skills and strategies. Han steps back to let the newbies fight together in formation. Although they're young and inexperienced, they find strength in numbers, and they perform well in the field, especially under Aaron's leadership. Even though Aaron isn't an especially promising warrior himself, the new heroes look up to him. Their shield and spear combos make them useful in battle. Han is right to keep his distance as the newbies clear the floor mostly by themselves. 2 of them even level up when they return to the lobby. The kids are embraced by their friend Daika, the 3rd member of their trio. Everyone seems excited about their progress, but only Han knows what danger they are in now that floor 5 is looming. He's pretty sure even he might struggle to survive, so who knows what chance the others stand. Their master has been logging in more and more often, which has brought some important upgrades to the lobby, namely a blacksmith, a tanner, and an equipment workshop. Having carpenters and blacksmiths turns out to be extremely useful, as they manage to distribute weapons across all the newly summoned heroes, giving them a far higher chance of surviving the training period. Any higher rank equipment they manage to produce is given to the main party, which is currently Han, Jenna, Aaron, and a rotating set of the young guys who look up to him. After a few days of practicing, the long-awaited 5th floor arrives. Han warns his allies in the main party to expect this to be tougher than the levels they've conquered thus far, though he doesn't admit just how bad it's going to be. When they pass through the time rift, they arrive in the ruins of an abandoned town, a big change from the open fields they've been fighting on before. Now the other big change is that they can't see any monsters, which throws off the newbies immediately. Trying to keep everyone calm and collected, Han orders the party to make their way to the city centre and scout out the situation. As they pass empty streets, Han begins to worry that this floor will have a different objective. Up until now, they've always been tasked with subjugation, a simple battle to the death with a small but manageable group of enemies. But since there are neither monsters nor civilians in these deserted streets, it seems this quest will be different. Jenna gets a better look from up high, where she discovers not hundreds but thousands of goblins gathering outside the city walls, 1846 to be exact, and they're headed straight for the party. Aaron and his boys start to panic, but Han reassures them that they don't have to kill every single one. Their objective is only to survive, so they just have to endure the goblins for half an hour from the point of first contact. Of course, it's much easier for terrified warriors to face 10 minutes than 30, so Han lies to his team and tells them they only have to hold out for 10 minutes to keep them from panicking. The buildings are blocked off so they can't sit and hide. Han rallies the team and keeps them moving, trying to get them into a defendable position in an alleyway. Han knows that this kind of quest is almost impossible for a young hero team. When a survival mission appears on the lower floors, it is known as a hero grinder, with only a 9% chance of survival. But he has to ignore his own doubts if they want to survive. Han orders the party into an alley narrow enough to force the goblins to approach them one by one. It doesn't take long before one wandering goblin spots Han, and their timer begins as the monsters start flooding in. Han orders the team to make a wall with their corpses. It seems like a good tactic if only they can stay alive long enough to manage it. With so many thousands of goblins, who knows if they'll even make it halfway, let alone the whole half hour. Fighting off wave after wave is tiring and requires Han to carefully reorder the team whenever he sees them start to flag. He takes on the bulk of the enemies himself, trying to kill as efficiently as possible using the least stamina per hit. He orders Jenna, who is proving herself a real asset, to help the younger heroes with support from the back. They have so many enemies to face that she has no choice but to gather her arrows immediately after she shoots them. Aaron is starting to panic on his side, and is now doubting that the time limit is really 10 minutes like Han told them. It was then suddenly Zid misses a block and loses a hand. Now he's bleeding, which means his health will go down really fast. Not only is his life in danger, but having even one less hero means their chances of survival just plummeted like his health. And to make matters even worse, poor Zid is now frightened, which means all of his stats have decreased too. Things are really starting to look tight for this team now. Han starts screaming at him, reminding the young hero that he'll be healed as long as he gets back to the waiting room. He calls him a crybaby, and some other words I don't think I can repeat on this channel. I guess he's trying to inspire him. It's a pretty aggressive way of going about it because of how badly they're outnumbered. Han has no choice but to call the injured Zid back to battle and demands that he switch with Hansen, saying that they'll all die if he doesn't get his act together. It seems harsh to put it on a teenage boy, but the situation demands that they all fight to the time limit. They can't spare even seconds for someone to rest. Jenna makes a hasty bandage to halt Zid's bleeding, so the heroic young lad gets up and takes the place of Hansen, whose sword seems to have swung its last. Han is still eliminating goblins left and right, yelling at Hansen to use his shield to fight instead. At the 3-minute mark, Han is switching his teammates around almost every 10 seconds to keep them fighting in short, sharp bursts to preserve their energy. Jenna is running out of arrows, which spells trouble for everyone. Without their artillery support, Zid misses an enemy approaching, and when he's distracted for just a moment, he earns a blade to the belly for his mistake. Jenna finishes off the goblin responsible just a moment too late, and comes forward to find their youngest member collapsed and on the brink of death. The fate of the entire party now hangs in the balance of Zid's rapidly depleting life. Jenna starts to freak out, wondering if she should pull the sword from his wound or if that would only make it worse. Meanwhile, Hansen hasn't noticed his comrade has fallen and begs him to switch in to give him a break from battering and defending with nothing but a shield. Luckily, Han is there just in time to take over for Hansen and orders him to a different passageway so that he can take on the worst of the mob himself. He doesn't tell Hansen the truth about Zid's condition because that would only make things worse. So when Ziza comes to death only seconds later, Hansen has no idea that his friend has just died on the ground beside them. Yikes! Han forces Jenna to stop thinking about the death and commands her to keep helping them fight. With only minutes to go, every second is critical, and the adrenaline and fear of the final push is making them gain skills just as quickly as they lose lives. There is a risk of losing more lives, probably due to his exhaustion. It's Hansen who next gets hit. Now that he's bleeding, he is also frightened, and stops fighting to beg their leader Han to save him. The entire might of the goblin horde is upon him while the kid just screams for his life. But Han knows how to play this game, and he knows what it takes to survive. So he doesn't blink an eye, summoning both Jenna and Aaron to his side, instead of saving their wounded newbie. In the time it takes them to regroup, Hansen is gone, and with him goes the strategic advantage of the alleyway. Without enough people to defend the entrances, the remaining trio has to keep moving. They approach a dead end, where Han orders Jenna to climb up and help the rest of the team get to high ground. Just as she's making the ascent, the goblins find them again, leaving Han and Aaron to do the best they can to fend them off. Jenna is up. She helps haunt the balcony, no problem, but Aaron takes a deep wound to his leg while trying to climb up. So Han is forced to jump down again and kill the goblin responsible. Only he doesn't stop there. In a horrific but necessary move, Han slices Aaron's leg clean off. While they didn't have time to pull out the weapon, his choice puts Aaron in critical condition. I sure hope their valiant leader knows what he's doing. Now cornered on the balcony, there's nowhere else to run. Han and Jenna are left to stab and kick at the goblins attempting to climb up at them. It almost looks like they'll make it, but at the 30-second mark, disaster strikes again when Han is stabbed deep in his side, so deep that the goblin responsible manages to tear out half his insides with it. Jenna is hit next, and now every member of the party is bleeding and in critical state as the goblins gather from all sides. Han finally slumps to his knees, contemplating his death. He is angry with himself for losing teammates, angry for only making it to the 5th floor when, as a player himself, he was a master at the game. A miraculous final moment of heroism. Han uses his anger to give the goblins one last fight. Han Seojin, Loki, famous master of masters, cannot die on the 5th floor. He will not die in a place like this. Overcome with rage, Han picks up the berserk skill while he is slicing through goblins left and right, making a bloody mess on the battlefield, until the moment his sword breaks, but even that won't stop him. Not in berserk mode. Han rushes forward with nothing but his fists and a broken sword, ready to take on every enemy in the world if he has to, and just at that moment the timer stops, and it couldn't have come at a better time. A goblin's claws are inches from his face. The monster is only seconds away from taking the whole party. When the heroes return to the lobby, they level up and have their wounds immediately healed. But the exhaustion and trauma of the battles they faced weigh heavy. Jenna starts hysterically laughing as her legs collapse beneath her. Jenna asks if it will always be that hard in the future, but Han tells her that this level is unique and designed to make it almost impossible to survive if even one of them dies. But not these guys. They've beaten the odds no matter the cost. Yet the reminder of that cost and the price they paid hits hard. When Daika comes running over, congratulating them on their victory, and asking about his friends Zid and Hansen, Han tells him the truth, fast and plainly. The kid just stands there, shocked. As the exhausted remnants of their party limp off to their quarters to rest, Han is alone. He reminds himself that death is going to become more and more frequent as they climb the tower. There is no room for sentiment in a game like this. Before we continue, let's take a moment to shout out at Crasseltomlod 7068 who commented "You mama" on our auto hunting video. Thanks for commenting and haha. Han picks himself up, collapsing on his bed. He starts to wonder how it's possible that he's now acquired both the composure and berserk skills, which have the opposite functions of allowing him to hold on to and temporarily let go of his sanity, respectively. It's likely related to his dual nature as both a master and a hero, which both help and hinder him throughout his experience. After a well-earned rest, Han returns to the training ring the next day to find Jenna already up and practicing. He asks what made her start so early, and she only yells back that she doesn't want to die. I guess after the horror we experienced yesterday, every second is valuable, he thinks. Jenna also gained a lot of skills in their final few minutes on floor 5. Add to the fact that she has talent and puts in effort, and it seems like she might be more than an equal to Han at this stage. Aaron, on the other hand, didn't gain a single skill. It can't have been easy watching his 2 trainees die on the battlefield, but that has to be a bad sign, honestly. Han gets more and more worried about this guy with every chapter. While Aaron is struggling to advance, Han is nearly ready to move up to 2 stars since he's about to reach the maximum level for a 1-star hero while he's working out as usual. Jenna has a moment of weakness and comes over to feel his abs. Han, as usual, ruins the moment and gives her a sharp hit over the head, wondering how anyone can act normal and joke around after everything they endured the day before. Meanwhile, the other summoned heroes are being just as useless as usual. They only do the bare minimum of training, putting in just enough effort to avoid being synthesized, but not enough to actually improve. Aaron turns up late to training, burdened by the guilt of his trainees' deaths. But before he can start spiraling, Han tells him that the only reason Hansen and Zid died is because they were weak. All he can do is get stronger. When the master logs back in, he creates a whole new party with Jenna and Han, as usual, but with 3 new members they've never met before, who seem like they're only going to weigh them down. Instead of a floor, they enter a daily dungeon on a super easy level, where all they really have to do is acquire some materials. Han and Jenna leave the newbies to collect raw materials while they go hunting, as they've just about got sick of eating only potatoes. While Jenna is tracking down deer, Han goes after a different objective, seeking out the Queen of the Forest, a rare monster that only appears in forest dungeons. Han doesn't waste a moment, leaping into the fray to kill the surrounding deer before standing face to face with the Queen herself, who looks pretty mad that he just killed all her boyfriends. But the monster is still no challenge for Han, who returns to the party holding her head and a sword full of blood. Metal as hell, he gives the head to Jenna for her to cheerfully stab away at the skull, carving out the precious horn, which is the bit they really need. The attribute stone they gained from the Queen's death is low grade, but it will help them to advance as heroes and craft better items. When they arrive back at the waiting room, they're welcomed as heroes for a whole different reason, for bringing meat to camp. But Moody Han doesn't allow himself to sit down and feast like everybody else. Instead, he takes Jenna away from the fun and enters them into another daily dungeon known as Cinderella Plateau. I respect the grind, but can these 2 sit down for 1 meal? Han is after more attribute stones, so they seek out the magical beast of the plateau, a giant wolf, which is easy for 2 heroes of their skill level in dungeons like these. Jenna seems to be in her element, remembering her days as a hunter-gatherer living in a remote forest in the real world. She makes a comment saying that she wished the master would never come, which gets Han thinking. Maybe his underlings at Nilheim felt the same way. Maybe he wasn't the beloved master of masters to them, but just some tyrant dictator who forced them to do his bidding. A few days later, a party is put together for floor 6, this time with Han, Jenna, Aaron, and the last member of the trio, Daika. The universe seems to be cutting them some slack. After the horror of floor 5, floor 6 is an exploration quest. It means they need to sneak their way through and pick their enemies off without alerting a horde. It's a challenge in itself, but at least it's not an all-out bloodbath, not if they do it right. They make pretty light work of the first goblins they find, and with the first stage cleared, Han races off to get a glimpse of the enemies waiting for them up ahead. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.